And we are so honored here to have someone who has done so much work, continues to do the work here in Pittsburgh County, Manassas, Valley, and beyond. We are speaking with Delegate Michelle Maldonado, who is a candidate for Congressional District 10. Delegate Maldonado, so great for me. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be here. I'm so glad to be talking with you again. And it is definitely exciting times.
And I know you have a very busy day on your schedule. I know you got the fundraiser coming up to this evening, and you've been out and about. So can you just talk a little bit about how things are going for you on the campaign trail?
Yeah, so it's a really exciting and fast and full time. We have probably about 2/3 of our volunteers and people helping with the campaign are our younger voters, which was a real high priority for me because we have to get people across the generational spectrum, across the class spectrum, across the cultural spectrum, racial spectrum. So we're super excited because we have all of that. So there's a heartbeat that is picking up in tempo that has us canvassing. We canvass every day. We phone bank. We're almost done with postcards. We don't think we're going to go past Wednesday. Getting those out, and also text banking and phone banking. So we have a lot going on right now, and we are a grassroots campaign. The reality is, one of the things I want to model is how we can engage in politics differently that kind of challenges the established formula and machine that is typical for how people determine whether somebody's viable, whether somebody will move forward, whether somebody should be a candidate. So we are busting all the norms and we are super excited.
And, it's interesting you talk about machines because that's kind of where I wanted to go today. Going back on your expertise as a tech lawyer and knowing, being the founder of the Technology Innovation Caucus, and this week, upcoming this week, you got the AI Forward Summit,
Yes.
and and one of the things you have been on, from the beginning is talking about, how we incorporate more, artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. Can you talk a bit about for those who may not know what that summit is all about?
Yes, absolutely. First, I want to provide a little bit of context because
Yes.
AI is the word that people have latched onto, but it's really, the things that AI kind of plugs into, these things that we hear reference to called large language models, are sort of the other programs and algorithms. AI is just a component that's integrated into them that sort of makes things bionic, if you will. So it's really critically important, I believe, that not only do we have a qualified person in this seat, but there is a gap need at the federal level that is directly and squarely focused on AI and new and emerging technologies. And there aren't any other candidates that have the holistic sort of 360 experience that I have from being a tech lawyer to being a tech leader, and then fast forward to what I've done in the General Assembly around our AI work group, Tech and Innovation Caucus, and sitting on a national steering committee of AI work group for state legislators around the nation. And I also sit on the SRE board for AI Commission for AI in Education, as well as JCOTS. So there's a whole lot here. And because people don't understand it, the first and foremost thing that we have to do is a lot of educating of people. Like, what is this? What does it mean? Why should we care? And how does it look as part of what impacts our everyday life? So AI Forward is a summit that is being run, or forum being run, by the Future of Privacy Forum. So its founder, Jules Polonetsky, and I both come from AOL. We worked there at the same time, and we've been doing this work for a very long time. And what this forum is doing is looking at all the facets where what's on the horizon and what we all want to do as we're tackling the opportunities of innovation and creation and competitiveness is balancing it with the right to privacy, ethics, transparency, and education. So we have to balance rights and privacy protection and data protection with the need to allow our organizations across Virginia and, quite frankly, the nation to remain innovative and competitive. So this forum is going to discuss all those things. How does it look in government? How does it look in the private sector? How does it look in social areas like social media? How does it look in things like mental health, national security? All of these areas, there is not one place that technology of this kind doesn't touch. So we always say to people, there are all these sort of vertical issues that people look at, like housing and education, which are critically important. But technology is not a vertical, it is a horizontal that touches everything. And this forum is going to help us kind of explore some of those things.
And Dr. Maldonado, that's one of the things that when you talked about privacy, and you're someone as then who not just talks the talk but walks the walk, and you were very successful in implementing the state's first Child Data Privacy Act, and and so it really kind of goes towards the work you've done in that regard. So, can you, for those who may know, can you talk about that and why that was so important for you to see that come to fruition?
Absolutely. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I worked in the tech space as a lawyer, in the beginning of my career, I was really excited to work on pieces of what our company did around child data privacy and protection. Our whole platform had to incorporate those elements. So it is the incredible honor to fast forward to 2024, where I am fortunate enough to bring forward a bill that the governor signed and passed into law that will become effective July 1, that is Virginia's first online child data privacy protection act. And what it does is it strengthens the laws. We do have some data privacy laws on the books, but we don't have an expansive one that sort of connects and ladders very directly and clearly to our federal legislation on this. And the federal act is called COPPA, which is short for Child Online Privacy Protection Act. So we have expanded upon what the federal government requires without conflicting and then rendering it in violation of federal law. But we've added some things to protect our children. And one is limits on targeted advertising to our children, looking at restrictions and clarity around the data sharing and data privacy aspects. And something that's new that the federal law doesn't even have is around geo-targeting. So what often happens, we have tracking features in our technology, in our apps, and sometimes they're just turned on and people don't know. Well, once this law goes into effect on July 1, companies have to, for children under 13, they have to, when that geo-targeting feature is activated, it has to have a prominent display to be able to show that it's active, and it has to stay until the feature is turned off. So there's never forgetting. There's much more transparency around it, and there's also additional things about how long they can retain the data, how they share the data, all these things. Now, I think it's a great step forward for Virginia in protecting our kids, but I don't think it goes far enough. I think under 13, that age threshold is far too low, that we do need to make it higher, because we see our children, our preteens, our 15, 16-year-olds really struggling with some of the things that are happening in social media and some of the things that they are exposed to. And we have to balance restrictions around age with balancing with First Amendment rights, which is where a lot of states who have tried to pass more aggressive laws have been conflicted out and their bills ended up in courts and failing, because there are still, no matter your age, you still have First Amendment rights, you still have all these things. So you really need somebody who can kind of navigate that minefield in some places, and the co-creative space as well.
And you talk about the measure of Congressional District 10 has that mixture of rural and urban environments. And like I say, kind of going back with your experience as a tech lawyer and adding innovative processes and procedures, what are some of the needs that you're hearing in regards to that? So how do you be able to make it work for the western end of the county as much as the eastern end of the county, and some of the things you want to implement as congressman?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing we have to recognize is that CD10, it's not a east-west. Some need technology, some don't. Some need jobs, some don't. CD10 is home to very highly educated, technically savvy voters, as well as farmers who also have technical abilities because of the farming equipment that they use, and younger voters who are digital natives that grew up with a lot of this technology as sort of what was their normal. And so we must make sure that we get people to understand that, most people look at, well, I need a job. Inflation is high. These are the things. Environment is, we're having climate injustice, environmental injustice, climate change. We're having, struggles with our power grid and new and clean energy transitions. All of these things matter. And all of these things impact the totality of CD10. And technology comes in because if you're looking for jobs, guess what? The workforce is going to have to be skilled differently to meet the moment. And so our education pathways, whether they're apprenticeships, whether they're boot camps, whether they're traditional 2 or 4 year college pathways, they have to be modified to make sure we're meeting the moment. And then in terms of people who are already in the workforce, making sure we're upskilling them properly to meet the requirements of growing technology. And then you look at how we're looking at the climate. Well, making sure that we have power infrastructure, grid power, for whether it's data centers that we're struggling with around the placement, proliferation, and impact of those, and what requirements should be in place before they're approved and where they're placed and all of that, to clean energy like solar and wind and water, things like that. Technology will be another thread that helps to facilitate those. Um, and so, there's no place that it doesn't touch, and there's no segment of the population that it doesn't impact. But when you talk about technology, people kind of think that that's something not directly impacting them. They don't look at it as a kitchen table topic. But when you understand that it's impacting the mental health of our children, that it impacts perhaps how you get a job or get screened for an apartment or how you get a promotion, you can begin to see very quickly that technology is, in fact, a kitchen table issue.
Delegate Michelle Maldonado joining us. And Delegate, you talked about with families. Like I said, it may not, while technology in itself may not be a kitchen table topic, the issue of children and accessible childcare is. And let's say it's Congressional District 10 that has a lot of government workers and tech workers and things of that nature. Well, when they have the accessibility to these jobs, but being able to take care of their children is a priority. And that's one of the things that you've been continuing to do the work in Richmond. So you can talk about that for just a moment, please, about the work you've done to make sure that parents have accessible and affordable childcare.
Absolutely. This, as a parent myself, I struggled with this when our son was very little. And that was at a time where many companies didn't even have parental leave for fathers after a child was born. We're doing better now. Usually, for most organizations now, both can take leave, of course. But what I would say is that I have been a strong proponent and understand as a parent and legislator that we need universal child care. We need paid family leave. We need paid sick leave, because if we are going to have a strong economy that allows everyone to participate, the family unit has to be secure. The family unit must be supported so that mothers, fathers, guardians, caretakers of our children have flexibility and ability to have access to good paying jobs. And we continue, and I have done that in my entire time in the General Assembly, to make sure I support those bills, advocate for those bills, work with advocacy groups, work with other co-patrons to make sure we put that in place. Some of those bills have made it to the governor's desk this year, and they were vetoed. And the problem with that is very short-sighted. If you want a strong economy, you want strong families. If you want a good education system, you want strong families. If you want good health care, you want strong families. These are all interconnected. I will continue to work on that until, we are one of the very few developed nations that doesn't have a holistic sort of paid family leave, universal child care, all of those things. And we need to come and join modern society, because caring for the people means caring for all of what our experiences are in our nation.
Absolutely. And Delegate, one of the things too that you have also been champions for reproductive rights. You were given an A+ rating, repro. And so that's when you talk about that is because we've seen that, especially not just on a local level, but on a national level, when it comes to the issue of reproductive freedoms. So Delegate, can you just share a bit more about the work you've done and you continue to do to help with women's rights, especially reproductive rights?
Absolutely. I sit on the Courts of Justice Committee where all the abortion ban bills came through. Particularly this session, there were two in particular that were incredibly offensive. And I've been very clear from day one that women need to be the voice of championing this, and our men should be our allies and champions, but the voice, the face of it needs to be women. This is an issue that is personal, that is private to women and birthing people. And whenever we see something like this, that parties want to say is a Democratic or Republican issue, we know that it's broader than that, because even in red states where it got on the ballot, got into voting polling stations, even in the red places, people were still in favor of reproductive freedoms, abortion care. And now, because we see, I think our Republican folks are seeing that trend, that it is an issue that they're struggling with, they have pivoted somewhat to also include contraceptive care. So I tell people we must codify Roe and we must protect access to contraceptives because this is an increasing and inching out. We've seen it with contraception, we've seen it with IVF treatment. And so this is more of government and politicians getting into the private, personal, medical areas of patients. And that is unacceptable. It should be a red line. It should not be a line we cross. I've always fought to make sure that that is the case, and with the legislation that we brought forward as well. And I also believe that we have to make sure that we are protecting it going forward. Roe was gutted. So we have an entire set of generation of young people who have fewer rights than I did growing up, whether it's from voting rights to reproductive rights to contraceptive care to IVF care. Around the nation, we are seeing rollback and regressive legislation being put forward. Right now, it is a critical time that we have a champion in place that understands this and that can fight, because it is a fight. Usually I don't use words like fight because I believe that words matter, but the fighting here is a protection. It is necessary because, again, if women and child and birthing people do not have agency and autonomy over when, if to have a child, a family, then we are taking rights away. And that should alarm everybody.
And one of the things, Delegate, that you've also been able to be successful in your time as delegate is being able to work across the aisle. You know, some of the bipartisan issues. And that's one of the things I know would be very critical in an area such as Congressional District 10. So can you just share one of the things I think was recently was House proof was for the crypto regulation bill, which I know you've been champion for quite some time. So can you talk about that your work in Congress will be as someone who can reach across the aisle and work in unison to get bills passed?
Absolutely. It's one of the things that, so in my non-political work, that's one of the things that I do. I'm skilled and trained in bringing people together across polarized environments and helping them to get results. And that's been informed by my work, what we have called sort of maintaining the humanity and the child separation policy at the Arizona border, or working with community leaders in Minneapolis after the murder of George Floyd, or more locally, partnering to work to help congressional staffers recover after the January 6th attack on the Capitol. We know when I first came into office in 2021, the first thing I did was go across the aisle to my colleagues in my class that were Republicans. And I said, I am committed to working together on the places where we have some common ground. Now, a lot of times people think common ground is this big pie, but sometimes it's the size of a quarter. Not the size of a big pie. And we have to start where we are to build trust to get people at the table for the more difficult conversations. That's been my training. I brought that to the General Assembly. And I believe that I am known for that. And when we have conflict or whatever, I don't do it publicly. I do it one-on-one so that we can kind of work it out without people feeling like they're being belittled or degraded in a public setting. We'll never be able to really move forward. I mean, there are times you have to call people out when something is really egregious, but how you do that also matters. And this session, that all sort of bore out as somebody who, in all of my elections in the state level, I needed Republican, Independent, and Democratic support, and I got it. I have Republicans all the time that tell me that they supported me, that they voted for me, as well as independents and Democrats, because they know that I'm going to work across the aisle, I'm going to listen. This session, I passed the highest number of bills in the House Democratic Caucus, and I passed the highest number of unanimous bills in the House of Delegates. So some of them were simple and easy, some were middle, and some were hard. And that's really what it's like. Now, at the federal level, that we have some real challenges. We have some people who are intent on sort of degrading the fabric of our democracy, and we'll only get so far with some of those folks, the MAGA extremists, in the chaos caucus, if you will. But some of them we will break through because it's a time for moral courage, not just, we need a higher level of courage to meet this moment. And so I also believe that with somebody who has a deep understanding of 360 view of technology, that technology actually is not it's not a bipartisan issue. I mean, it's not an issue that we can't get people working together on.
Yes.
So we can, to correct myself, we can work in a bipartisan fashion on technology, but working on it isn't enough if you don't bring the depth of understanding, expertise, and skill. And that is why I think I will be effective in joining others who are working in this space to really bring a whole complementary set to help move us forward.
And as you say that, Delegate, one of the things too that you have done in your campaign, you one of the few, and maybe only that congressional candidates have spoken out on the truth of Project 2025 and the potential threat they can be to this nation, to our democracy as it is. So, and I know it's really starting now to gain steam and momentum. I know people want to relate it to the general election, and from the White House, what have you. But can you kind of share your experiences and what it's been like, conversations you've had about Project 2025?
Absolutely. I will tell you that most people don't know about it, which is why I started talking about it, because our voters have to be informed by truly understanding what's at stake. Because, in Virginia, we have elections every year. And every year we say it's the most important election. And every year we ask our volunteers, we ask our voters, we ask our donors for so much. But this is critical because Project 2025 has been in planning for quite some time. And we've seen glimpses of what it looked like in the last presidential administration. And that by, appointing somebody to the Department of Energy who was a climate denier, or appointing somebody for the Department of Education who wasn't a big fan of public education. So it's that and more around how our agencies will be stacked and racked with people who don't necessarily align with the democratic values. And when I say democratic, I don't mean our party, I mean as a nation, as a democracy. And so that's our agency heads, what's going to happen with our reproductive freedoms, what's going to happen with our education history curriculums. So all of those things these are things that will change the nature of our country, and then change the mindset and the psyche of those coming up through our school systems, those coming up under the policies. And it is a total reframing that is more authoritarian and less democratic than we have seen in this country and I think in our history. And so I think other candidates are beginning to speak about it. But I have been chatting with folks and they are surprised. They had no idea that there was this concerted, focused, orchestrated effort in this way. And so I've been trying to share it to educate people. I'm not a big fan of stoking fear or anger as the levers to motivate people to vote. I think people do that far too much. We know that they work. If people are highly emotional, highly charged, they tend to take action. But at the same time, we want people to stay grounded and aware of what's at stake so they can choose wisely and be strategic in their responses.
And one of the things, because the truth, we know the truth itself will speak for itself. It will drive people to action. It needed. And so I'm bring it home with this, Delegate Maldonado, is that you are one of your candidates who actually lives within the congressional district. So you know the needs of your constituents and what they're hearing. And based on just your experience and your success as delegate, what are some of the things that you are hearing in your conversations with your constituents in that district? Say, hey, this is what we need and how it can be answered.
Yeah, our constituents they know what they want, they know what they need, and they're very clear about it. And I'll share some examples of that. But first, I want to offer a little bit of context for what we're looking at in Northern Virginia. So Northern Virginia is represented by some amazing legislators in Jerry Connolly and Don Beyer and our beloved Jennifer Wexton. And a lot of people ask, what about Abigail Spanberger? Abigail is amazing, but her district dips into Prince William County and moves south, not north. So the totality of Northern Virginia is really represented by these three legislators. Now, if you look at that, you take the slice of Jennifer Wexton and Barbara Comstock from the Republican Party before her, you can see that they broke the glass ceiling. In the 400 plus years of our Commonwealth's existence, there's never been women at the federal table representing Northern Virginia. So I believe that it is critically important that it is progressive instead of regressive to continue having a qualified woman represent this seat. But I also believe that not only a qualified woman, someone who lives in the district and who has experience representing portions of the district. I am the only qualified woman in the race who has all of that. I live in the district and I have experience representing the district. I think it's a vulnerability. A lot of people don't like it when other people come from other places that don't live, sleep, play, work, educate here, and then try to represent it. For some people, it doesn't matter. But I will tell you, the one thing I've heard across the line is that most people didn't even know it wasn't a requirement. People are assuming that you must live in the district in order to run. So sharing that, I think I am from that perspective. And again, I say it's a qualified woman. It's not a sort of just any woman, right? Because we really want to make sure qualified people are in this seat. The second thing to sort of answer your question about what am I hearing at the door is people are very scared and very concerned about reproductive rights and abortion care and contraceptive care and IVF care. What is happening there? People are concerned about the environment. People are concerned, particularly across CD10, the environment at the intersection of clean energy, of water, of soil, of habitat impact when it comes to data centers. And what is going to happen across our district as more data centers are being considered for placement, for proliferation, and what's the impact they're going to have. We're also hearing people very, very concerned about, continuing to be concerned about education and history curriculum and the accuracy of that. And no surprise, the Israel-Hamas Palestinian sort of trifecta conflict that's happening there, the Ukraine war that Russia has instigated and we are in the throes of. And for those who are even more savvy about some of the hotspots around the world, the genocide that's happening in Sudan, or what's happening in Haiti, and what's happening in some other Central and South American countries. So we're hearing all of these things, and also protecting. One of the biggest things right now is our veterans and what's happening with the resources, support, and education around veterans' children, and what's happened recently. And we're working really hard to make sure we make sure that our veterans have the support they need, that their children can be educated, that their benefits can be fully accessible. So that's something that we're hearing at the doors as well. And so I think it's really important that we face all of those. There's so much more because everything's complex. But one of the things I will close this last example is everything's so expensive. Everything's so expensive. I keep hearing that there's inflation, or I hear job growth is growing, and then I hear it's not. Then I hear inflation is getting better, but then it's not. But whatever the story is that's told, I don't feel it at the kitchen table. I don't feel it. When I go to get groceries, it feels and is more expensive. When I buy clothes for my children for back to school or for whatever, it feels and is more expensive. And so we have to address that. Part of that is sort of the infusion of capital and in the economy during COVID and post-COVID. But other part that people really don't talk about is during the last presidential administration, the former president imposed tariffs on China and Mexico. And at the time, the criticism was when you do that, that's going to impact the cost of those goods. And those countries will just simply pass those, as well, our country pass those increased costs onto the consumers. So that is, in fact, what has happened in part as well. So that all adds. So we have to figure out, how do we make things more affordable for our people? I lied. The last other thing that's important to me as somebody who experienced housing insecurity and food insecurity as a
Yes.
child is affordable, accessible, attainable housing. And it's across the spectrum. It's our homeless, people who are experiencing homeless. It's people in mobile home communities. It's the missing middle that's happening where people can't afford rent. They can't afford first time home ownership. And even in our affluent communities at the end, there is something that hits the swath of all of it. And that is something that I'm just as passionate about as I am around tech. So those are the kinds of things that I'm hearing.
To handle the issues as complex as Congressional District 10, it'll take somebody who understands those complexities and someone who has the background to do so, which you certainly do, Delegate Michelle Maldonado. And I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. Think would be just a part of the democratic process and seeing things come to pass. Hope to hear good things in the future.
Thank you so much for having the conversation today. I appreciate it. And I just want to leave with this last thing with our folks is to remember that early voting has started and the last day of early voting is June 15th, but early in-person voting on Saturdays starts June 8th and election day, of course, is June 18th.
Absolutely. We're seeing glass ceilings breaking all over the world, and we see some here in Congressional District 10. Delegate Maldonado, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.